You might have seen my video on making up the MPCNC Burley. Well, I've decided to upgrade it now and upgrade it to the newer version, the Primo, which is supposed to be better. I'll let you know whether it's better or not when I've finished building it. So I've disassembled, stripped down the Primo. These are the printed parts, sorry, of the Burley. I've stripped down the Burley. These are the printed parts in the box. If anybody wants to make a Burley, there's a complete set of parts there for them. And I've printed out the parts that I need for the Primo. Didn't take me very long because I got 3 large printers going flat out all day and all night, printing out several parts at once on each printer. Took me about 2 days to print everything. So there's the protein for the Primo, and there's the hardware that I stripped out of it. The hardware, the router, and all the parts. I'm going to start building the core according to the instructions given on GitHub, if you can find them. And the first thing we need to do is get 4 bearings and 4 bolts and place it in for the Z axis of the Primo, which I'll do that now. So we tighten up these 4 bolts. There are those 4 are all tight. We've got the 4 Z-axis bearings in. Now we need to get 4 more bearings and put them in these 4 positions here, which I'll do now. Now do these 4 up nice and tight. Not so tight that you can't turn the bearing, or not so tight that it squashes the plastic. So make sure the bearings still turn freely. Now we've got to do the core clamps. The core clamps are all the same except for one which is different. The core clamp Y, which goes in this position. The logo goes down there. The core clamp Y goes in this position. It's got a hole in it, and that faces downwards. So that's core clamp Y, and that gets bolted into position there. And then we do the other core clamps, and they, if you look, they've got a gap, a flat end there that faces inwards towards that one. And the other 2 on the other side also face each other like that, and like that, and like that. Okay, I've more or less finished the core now. I realized I can't carry on because I was going to use the vitamins from the old Burley, and everything's been beefed up on the Primo, so I've had to order some more parts. I went back to the parts list. Seems like all the M4 bolts are now upgraded to M5. Everything's a bit thicker, so the M8s are longer, and so on. Now, I just about got away with doing the core. I need to wait for some more nuts and bolts to come from Amazon before I can continue. So watch this space. Now I've finished the core, and the extra parts have arrived. The extra M5 nuts and bolts and so on have arrived from Amazon, ready to start laying out the MPCNC Primo machine. So this is my baseboard. I'm using 600 by 300, same size as my Burley. The most important thing is that you measure out exactly where you're going to put the feet. First of all, the feet need to be exactly the same size. Make sure you do that. Using a set square, mark out where you're going to put the feet. Measure carefully the positions and mark the corners. The outside corner of each of these feet will be the exact length of the pipe that you use for the x-axis and the y-axis. So I've done that. The next thing to do will be to drill the feet into position so that we can carry on assembling the MPCNC Primo. I did see on the GitHub for the Primo there is a list of the additional parts that you need for the Primo if you've already got a Burley. These include the nuts and bolts that I've ordered, and also they recommend that you upgrade from 5mm to 10mm belts and pulleys and idlers. And I've ordered those as well. They should be here tomorrow. So we'll start off by bolting these feet in. So for this job we need a bunch of M5 screws and nylock bolts. They recommend you pre-thread the nylock bolts. I'm not going to bother, and I'm going to use self-tapping wood screws to attach these to the MDF base. So the M4 screws go in there, and the nylock threads onto there. They can be tightened up later on when we finally adjust everything at the end. Make sure that the 25mm pipe comes all the way to the bottom. Place the leg, the foot, carefully in position, and now you can drill pilot holes if you like, or you can be lazy like me and just drive the wood screw straight in. So I've put the first one in. Just make sure it's all nice and square. There you go. These holes are oval so that they are adjustable. Do it for all of them. There we are. I do that for all four. We do that for all four before we go on to the next part of the build. Now we've got all 4 feet in position. You need to measure them, the distances between them. To make sure it's all the same. What's particularly important is the diagonal. Make sure that the diagonal is the same. There you are, 98. 98 exactly. If it's not exactly right, don't worry too much about it. Just dismantle everything and start again, because it's very, very important that this is all accurate. And tell me how I know this. I've already built a burley, and I had to do the layout again because it wasn't exactly right. It's got to be exactly right. Now we've got these 4 parts. I can't remember what the name of them is. When we need to drop an M5 nylock nut in there, but in this case it probably is a good idea to pre-thread them. So I'm just going to pre-thread all of these. I'll just do one and drop it in. They are nicely pre-threaded. Take it off again. And that needs to go face down in the recess there. My fingers are too fat. Just give it a little tap so that it stays nicely in there, and do that for all 4 of them. Each of these needs to be screwed into one of these pieces now. So be lazy and use an electrical screwdriver. Just goes in like that. Screw it in. That needs to be done for all 4. Now we place the rail mount on the feet. The y-axis is going north-south on this. So we need to make it so that the spacers, all the spacers are pointing outwards. That'll make the wide part of this rail mount facing outwards on both axes. Do that with all 4. And now that I've done it, I've realized I made a mistake with the spacing of my feet, and they are too far apart. So I'm going to have to move my feet slightly. I'll do that later. I wasn't entirely happy with the placement of the feet, so I've moved them, and I've discovered there's a couple of things you should bear in mind. That is the distance between the feet and the length of the tube. There's a difference of 32 millimeters. The tube should be 30 millimeters longer than the distance between the feet in both axes. Either that, so you either need to cut your tube according to the distance of your feet plus 32 millimeters, or if you've already cut the tube, measure the distance of between the feet as the length of the tube minus 32 millimeters. The other thing, the orientation of these tube holders is quite important. I've got it so that the y-axis is facing north-south, the x-axis east-west, and if this spacer here, if the spacer there, it lines up with the shape on the foot, then you should have everything right, I think. Then you'll see when you offer up the top that you've got the recess for the belt adjusters in the right place. The x-axis belt adjuster goes that way, and the Y-axis belt adjuster goes this way. If you put it all together and you've put the wrong thing in the wrong place, you're going to have a lot of dismantling to do. We're going to add the Z-axis to the core now. The first thing we need to do is prepare the two rails. They recommend that the holes that you drill should be slightly larger than M5 for the M5 screws to allow for adjustment. We've got the two rails from the Burley, which had holes for M4, and they were drilled according to this template, which you can download off Thingiverse. So I'm going to use the template again and drill these holes. I think I'll drill them out to M6. That should be fine, to 6 millimeters. You also need to put these capture nuts into the thingamajigs that go inside the pipes. They recommend that you glue the nuts with CA. I tried CA last time, it wasn't very successful, so I've used contact adhesive this time. So I'll drill those out. I've glued the nuts into there, and we need to assemble the X-axis stepper motor, the Z-axis stepper motor. First of all, we've already got the coupler and the lead screw from the Burley. That's all assembled. I haven't disassembled that. I take the first bulkhead part and screw the stepper motor into there with these M3 bolts, and with a bearing in the second one that slides over the top of that. And then what we need to do is using a large screwdriver to slightly separate these clamps, slide the rail down in. It's a bit awkward, so I'll do it off camera and show you, and we'll carry on when I've completed this little assembly here. Okay, it's assembled now. We need to slide these bolt capture things in. It's got an arrowhead. Arrowhead goes towards the top. Just slide it in. Oops, I've done that one. In this one. Slide it in. There we go. Make sure the holes are lined up. There we are, should be good to go there. Need to stick 4 M5 bolts, drop them through here. These are for tightening these clamps. Don't tighten them up yet. That's the other side, because we need to line up these holes with the tool mount. When we've done that, the next thing will be to slide it in to the core. So now we slide the Z rails into the core. Just with your fingers you can just rotate the lead screw and down it goes. I've got a couple of end caps sticking in the top just to tidy things up a bit. Haven't tightened everything yet, but there we go. I might do a redesign on those because they're a bit flimsy. And the last thing we need to do on this axis well, it's not the last thing, but the next thing that we need to do is get these little wedges. They're mirrored, so make sure that you've got them correct. It's got a chamfered edge on one side. The chamfered edge matches up with this chamfered edge there. That goes on there, and then we bolt the last bearing on there. So we've got all the bearings then for the Z rails. So I'll bolt those in now, and then the last thing we'll do is put the final bearings in for the X and Y axis and add the tool mount, which is a much simpler affair than on the Burley by the looks of things. Now here we are, we're just putting the last one in. I must say that this whole Z-axis arrangement is a much simpler one than on the Burley, so hopefully it's going to be more effective as well. That's the last one. Just need to put the M8 bolts on the other side now, and they're all sorted. So I'll tighten up those M8 bolts in a minute. The last thing, I'm not sure whether we should do it now or later, is put the bearings in for the X and Y axis. There's 4 bearings, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that'll be the whole of the center arrangement complete, apart from the tool mount, which goes here and here, and they're just screwed in with M5 nuts, M5 bolts, I think. Anyway, we'll see to that when we come to it. I was a little bit puzzled about this tool mount here, and wondered how I was going to fit my 660 on there, which is the spinner that's recommended for this machine. As you see, I've got it set up with a dust shoe, a magnetic dust shoe, which I used on the Burley. And I was thinking I could just reuse this, but which I can, but not with the recommended tool mount. If I want to use this, which was designed for the Burley, I need to retrieve my Burley tool mount, and that will mount nicely on there. I'll have to drill the holes out for M8 and mount my DW660 on that. However, I've decided to print the new Primo tool mount, which means I can't use this dust shoe. So I'll have a rethink about the dust shoe. I had a look on Thingiverse for various options, and I think maybe I'm going to have to design my own dust shoe, because none of the ones I saw on Thingiverse really met my requirements. I may be wrong, I might find something suitable. Anyway, that's something for me to think about whilst we continue the build of this machine. The next thing we do, of course, is to make what they call the trucks. I don't know what they used to be called on the Primo, but they're the things that run along the rails. So trucks is a good name for them, I guess. And for that we need 4 of these parts. they're mirrored on each axis, and each one has got a little red bit that slips in there to tighten up the opposing axis for each truck. The stepper motor mounts there. There's about six bearings on each, and maybe more, can't remember. So we'll put those together and see what challenges that presents. Right, I was wrong. There's actually 5 bearings on each truck. You need to have a look at this view carefully, because it indicates the directions in which the bolts go in. There's 5 bearings that go in each bolt, and of course there's an M5 bolt for this little tightener that goes on the top here. So I'll just put that together. That'll be 1 truck done, and there's 5 to do. Sorry, 4 to do. 4 trucks to do. And then we do them up, not so tight that it squashes the plastic, but tight enough so that, get that on there, tight enough so that it holds the bearing firmly, so that the bearing doesn't rattle, but it's still able to turn freely. That should be about right. So bearings turning easily, no rattle. Do that for all the bearings. So there's the truck. I've placed it on the rail to test it. They say that if you tip it at 45 degrees, it should start moving. So there you go, 45 degrees. Maybe this is a little bit too tight. I'll just... The screws you've got to bother about are these ones that go through the main axis. If they're too tight, it'll pinch it together and it won't move at all. I think mine's just about right. Moves at 45 degrees. Now that we've attached the bearings to the trucks and then they're running nice and smoothly on the rails, we'll complete the assembly of the trucks. The first thing to do is to thread the 10mm bolt. It's a large belt, sorry. It's a larger belt than on the Burley, which we used 5mm. So that needs to be changed, and the pulleys need to be changed as well. So push the belt through. Through the slot in the truck, and also we need to make a loop on the belt there to go through the so that the stepper motor pulley can go on there. Then we drop the idlers in on each side of the belt. They should be smooth idlers. It doesn't make it all that clear in the instructions. Not toothed idlers, because it's going on the smooth side of the belt. And then we put the bolts through the idlers. Press them through. There we go. I'll just do one, and the last thing we need to do is mount the stepper motor. That goes on the mounting there. I haven't tightened up the pulley yet, and we're going to need 4 M3 by 10mm bolts to fix the stepper motor into place. So I'll just do that and I'll show you the completed truck and then do the other three. Here I've completed the truck now. The stepper motor is bolted in with 4 M3 bolts. The belt is threaded through. The spacing of the pulley you can either do by eye, or they give you, or you can print this thing, and if like me you were wondering what it's for, well apparently you use it to gauge the gap between the pulley and the stepper motor. Seems to work. So I've done that, and now you can cut the belt slightly longer than the distance between the two, between the length of the rail that you've made this particular truck for, because you need a bit of extra to thread the belt through this adjustable end stop for the belt. I've measured the belt, I've threaded it onto the tensioner, and just need to cut the end off. There, and I need to do that with a 10mm belt for all 4 axes. For all 3 axes, and all should be tickety-boo. You tighten them with a tensioner, and that screw there. So tighten them so that they're nice and tight, not so tight that they play a bass note, but certainly not floppy. And also in the background over there, I'm just printing my design for a dust shoe. So when that's finished, I'll show you how that fits on. Now I need to repeat everything for the other trucks, the other 3 trucks. So let's go. I've finished all 4 trucks and I've placed them onto the rails, and the next thing to do is to put the tops on the legs. There's 4 of these. You've got to make sure that you've got the correct one on the correct leg. They're mirrored. If you can't get them all on, you've probably not printed them mirrored. And the slot for the belt tightener should be facing inwards on all 4 of them. So your belt tightener goes in that's the wrong one. Goes in there for all of them. I've mounted the end stops on all 4 of the trucks. Here you can see this one on the x-axis. I only used 2 end stops on the Burley. I'm not sure whether I'm going to use 4 on this or not. It does have the advantage of doing automatic squaring on the axis. I'm not sure whether my technical expertise is up to that or not, but just as I've got them, I'm mounting and wiring in 4 end stops. I haven't made up my mind whether to use 2 or 4 yet. So the next thing we do after fixing in the tops of the legs is to do the x-axis belts. To save a lot of trouble later, make sure that the ends of your rails are exactly flush with the edge. That'll save you a lot of trouble later on when you're trying to square it off. And when those are exactly flush, you can then tighten up all four of the screws. There we go, all lovely and tight. Do that for all four legs. Now the belts, I think I already showed you this for the y-axis, but what you do is you thread the belt through the truck, measure it up against the length of the axis, exactly the distance between the ends of these leg tops, snip it, put it into the end stop, to the adjustable stop. Remember that these are mirrored, so make sure you're doing it for the right one. Stick it in there. Oops, that's the wrong one, you see. The right one I've already stuck in there. Stick it in. Bang it in there, or put a nut in there, bang it in there, and tighten your belt up. Do that for both sides, and Bob's your uncle. Now we put the X and Y cross rails in, thread them through the gantry in the middle, and the last thing you do then is put the last 1, 2, 3, 4 bearings in. You probably won't be able to get the rails through if you put the bearings in before you put the rails. So you put those bearings in, the last 4, and then tighten them all up, not too tight. Now move the gantry into the center. Make sure you've got a nice right angle here between the cross rails. With whatever method you prefer. I use a set square. And when you've done that, you can tighten up all the remaining screws. That'll be the 4 screws to tighten up the clamps on the cross pieces. So we'll tighten this one up. And tighten them all up. And it might be a good idea in between tightening each one to check the set square. As a final check, push the gantry hard up into each of the 4 corners, and when it's hard up against the corners, measure the square. Make sure it's square. Do that in all 4 corners. You should be good to go. The next thing we're going to do is put the router on. or the spindle, or whatever it is that you want to mount.